great news story for netball.
You know what? Netball is going home. It's going back to where it first started.
The announcement came after a season of uncertainty and increasing player unease.
I'm a little bit worried about where netball's heading, if I'm frank. You know, I love the game and it would be really sad to see it not exist in this format.
Without a broadcast deal for next season, players will be playing for love, not money.
I think for a lot of girls, we've been nervous is probably one of the big words with the uncertainty of next season. This is our livelihoods. We do this as a job.
Australian sides are already contacting some players. They need to know, so they need to know where they stand.
But this week, a reprieve for the game.
New Zealand Netball have finally found a broadcast rights partner for the ANZ premiership.
The ANZ premiership for 2026 will be live and free on TVNZ and TVNZ Plus, and we're delighted. This is where netball started. It started, the first time that women's sport was available on broadcast was with TVNZ, and that's where we're heading.
Netball New Zealand's Chief Executive Jenny Wiley doing the interview rounds as the sport breathed a sigh of relief. But there are so many questions left unanswered, like...
Will they be getting a pay cut?
Yeah, look, we can't say right now. We do know that there will be a shift in the model.
Only a one-year deal. Jenny Wiley, CEO of Netball New Zealand, likely to go on after that. Why only 1 year?
There is understandable trepidation and nervousness in the netball community.
Hi, I'm Alexia Russell, and today on The Detail, I'm delighted to be sitting in the same room as two of New Zealand's premier sports writers to unravel the uncertainty and shifting ground around one of the country's favourite games. Locker Room founder and freelance journalist Suzanne McFadden and RNZ sports correspondent Dana Johansson. Let's start with Suzanne and the big announcement this week on netball's broadcast rights.
You can look at it many ways. It's big in that the sport will be free to air. It's still the largest women's sport in New Zealand. It's still the largest sport played in secondary schools. So making it have a broader reach is a great thing.
And it hasn't been free to air for how many years?
Since 2007.
Wow.
But that was the last time that it was on TVNZ.
A couple of decades.
Yeah, exclusively. In the last 2 years, TVNZ has had one game a weekend on free-to-air, but this is exclusive rights now.
So did they see during that last season that their numbers were trending up? Like, it's obviously worth it for them to sign Netball New Zealand up for every game.
Yes, as far as TVNZ were concerned, yes. Yeah, I think what they get out of it will probably be huge for them. I imagine netball would be now TVNZ's number one sport as far as coverage goes. But I think what's happened here is that Netball New Zealand have had a long-standing agreement with Sky as their principal broadcaster, and that's broken down.
I don't think Sky and Netball New Zealand have necessarily fallen out. I just think they're miles apart in terms of what they think the ANZ premiership is worth. Without anybody else in the market bidding for the rights, Netball New Zealand are kind of backed into a corner, really.
And this is the next best option for the sport.
Do we know why it broke down?
I think what's occurred in the last few years is that as there's been less and less, competition in that broadcast market, once Spark exited, Sky had that monopoly once again, and that meant they could really put the squeeze on sports. So what happened prior to that? Netball New Zealand actually signed an extension with Sky Sport before they needed to. So when Spark was entering the market, Sky went on a mission to snap up as many rights as they can. So they extended their deal with Netball New Zealand, and it was for a significant chunk of money. I think it was something in the realm of a $10 million deal spread across 3 or 4 seasons. But as Spark exited and there was no longer competition, it meant that that those rights packages were starting to get less and less, and rugby became more of a priority for Sky. So I think probably Netball New Zealand were quite disappointed with how the last couple of rounds of negotiations have gone. There hasn't been a lot of wiggle room there, so that's why we saw this year they sort of dipped their toe in with TVNZ and took one game over. The Saturday game was live on TVNZ exclusively this season, and now they're saying that that's working out for them and that there's a long-term future at TVNZ now.
So tell me more about the finances. I presume, thanks to those deals, that Netball New Zealand still has a bit of a pot of money. How much, Suze?
They've got $11 million in their reserves.
Wow. That's got to be unusual for any sport.
Yeah, I think they've seen this coming. They knew that they would probably have to have that backup. The interesting thing, I think, out of what has happened over the last few days is that we don't know whether TVNZ has actually put any money into this agreement.
Sky paid millions for the rights.
Has TVNZ had to pay for the netball rights? Obviously all that information is commercially sensitive.
Netball New Zealand has stressed that they will have to look at other avenues to pay the players.
The bottom line, though, is the broadcast deal usually pays player salaries.
So that's going to be, looking for more sponsors, going to the government, to Sport New Zealand for money, and dipping into those reserves.
Well, I think what we all know is the media market has shifted. It's really challenging out there, as is commercial and broadcast. So Netball New Zealand will be investing in this, but we're currently in talks with partners around how we can get some additional support.
They are going to put money towards the production of the coverage. So
Netball New Zealand will?
Yes, which is what they did with those Saturday games this year. They paid for them, they had them made, and then TVNZ showed them. So they've got this pot of money there that they can dip into. Of course, nobody ever wants to have to do that, but it may be that they take, a punch to the stomach this season and this coming season, 2026, of course, and then I guess they're hoping that they'll get more sponsorship deals because it's going out to more eyeballs.
Having a home for netball where it is visible across the length and breadth of the country can only improve those commercial propositions.
Does Netball New Zealand have its own broadcast crew, or will TVNZ be filming the matches?
They contract an outside broadcast crew to do that work for them, and they sort of design the innovations around how they want to show off the game, because that is really the shop window into the sport.
Yeah. Now, I've listened to, I think, 3 interviews with Jenny Wiley from Netball New Zealand. They're all the same interviews, but reading between the lines, as you touched on before, payments to the players, that seems a little bit up in the air. Nobody seems to know if they're taking a pay cut. Sort of assurances that they will be paid, but it seems to me like Netball New Zealand between the lines are saying they'll have to pay them this year.
Negotiations are going on as we speak, and between the New Zealand Netball Players Association and Netball New Zealand to settle on how much the players will be paid. So currently an ANZ premiership player receives a retainer. So the minimum is $26,000 and the top is $56,000. And that can be topped up by non-playing agreements and third-party agreements like, you've got a job, we'll get you a job at a radio station, part-time job, and we'll pay you through that. So that was an agreement that was carried over. The Players Association did a really good job to make sure that the players didn't lose any money this season, but I do think that there will be a cut that they will all unfortunately have to take, which kind of opens up this whole
what happens
can of worms.
Next kind of thing.
How many of our players will now go to play in Australia or England?
Yeah. Okay, let's look at the factors behind that, because there's been so much uncertainty up till Tuesday night as to what was going to happen here. And then, of course, the exemption rule has changed, which means we can see Grace Nweke come back.
Netball New Zealand has announced that the Silver Ferns eligibility criteria will be relaxed. That means star shooter Grace Nweke might be able to play for the Silver Ferns later this year, despite playing in Australia.
What does all this mean for our top players playing netball in New Zealand?
I actually think it's a good thing. I'd like to see more of our players playing overseas. getting.
Do you think they will
experience.
go overseas?
I think they will. I don't think there'll be a grand exodus because, first of all, those two major leagues don't have room just to fill up their teams with Kiwis. So I think...
So when you say two major leagues, you're talking about...
The England Super Netball and Australia Suncorp's Super Netball.
And do they both have limits on how many foreigners they can have in their teams?
There are actually no limits on imports in Australian Super Netball, which is quite controversial over there because there's a couple of teams where there's 4 or 5 imports on a team in key roles, so key shooting and defensive roles. And we know that imports, most teams will target each end of the court for their imports, and that really creates positional shortages when you get into that international environment. So the Australian Diamonds are having to blood some quite young, inexperienced players at international level, and we saw the impact of that possibly last year with the Consolation Cup, which the Silver Ferns won 3-1, and some really big wins as well.
Wiki puts her hand up and she finishes the job.
That's incredible.
Once more, the stars align for the Silver Ferns. For the 3rd time, they win the Constellation Cup.
Dominance that we haven't seen for quite a number of years, probably since the Irene van Dijk years. So that's really interesting to see, but there's no mood to change it. There's no real push to change that.
And it's good for the international game, isn't it?
Great for the international
players from places like Jamaica.
For a great example, they don't invest anything in high performance because their players most of them go to Australia, don't they? And they're blooded there. They're given all of this incredible experience over there, and then come back and play in the national team.
Bring it home. Yeah. And how many of our top players do you see heading off to Australia? Would a literal Silver Ferns team be playing over there next season?
I don't think you'll see as much as a full Silver Ferns starting lineup all based over there, but I think maybe a handful, maybe 4 or 5 players could pick up contracts. And the other opportunity, as Sue's mentioned, is the UK competition. They've actually poured a lot of money into that competition. They got a UK sport grant of about $50 million to throw into netball. Some of it's been carved off to the top end to rebuild their professional league. So if I was a young player, even on the fringe of the Silver Ferns, but wanting a bit of an OE, that's a really great option.
Dana says netball now faces competition for fans and eyes on screens from other codes that have woken up to women.
I think netball's always been an outlier in the sense that it was kind of the only one women's sport that was kind of built by women and designed for women, and through the kind of mid to late 90s found this kind of professional element. They were streets ahead of other women's sport when it came to actually providing a pathway for women to make a living from sport. But now that they're seeing a lot of competition as men's sport have woken up to the fact that the other 50% of the population exists, and perhaps we should provide them with opportunities too. So over the last 10 years especially, as cricket has professionalised the women's game, rugby's professionalised the women's game, even the likes of the Tauihi League in basketball is providing new opportunities. Netball's suddenly faced with competition there, and young girls have opportunities, which is awesome, but it is a challenge for netball.
Netball is trying to meet that challenge by innovating. Think the 2-point shot. But critics say it's not moving fast enough.
I think the 2-point innovation was something that Netball New Zealand probably fended off for a long time, but it got to the point where it had been introduced in Super Netball from, I think, the 2nd or 3rd season across the ditch, and it just added another element of the game. It changed things up and really brings the crowd into it as well. And I think Netball realised that that's where the game is heading. Netball New Zealand, rather, realised that that's where the game's heading, and that they need to possibly make the switch. And it was almost a sheepish announcement when it came out last year that they would be introducing this, because I think they probably sensed that the traditionalists would be upset about it, while other people would be like, you're just copying Australia sort of thing.
But we have to copy Australia.
You do. You just have to bite the bullet and admit when someone else is sort of a better idea than you.
Yeah. I have to admit that I am guilty of maybe sometimes just fast forwarding to the last 5 minutes of the game just to see.
See those 2 pointers?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, just going back to the players, this deal with TVNZ does not include the Silver Ferns, does it? Sky still has the Silver Ferns, is that right?
Yeah, so the current deal with Sky, which was signed earlier this year, that will run through to the end of this year. So Sky will still have the Silver Ferns games this year, but it's from next season, 2026, where the Silver Ferns are looking for a home.
Silver Ferns will play 12 tests between September and November, which is really good. They just announced a tour to England and Scotland at the end of the year.
This is a build up to the Commonwealth Games.
It is, yeah. So now they've got to go back to the drawing board again and try and get a deal for Silver Ferns. I feel like it might be easier to negotiate a deal for an international, which gets a lot more viewers, but I don't know where it's been left with Sky.
Do you see it going back to Sky? Do you see Sky thinking it will have that?
I think they might make a play for that, but maybe this is where TVNZ, step up their offer and say, well, we'll give you a bit more money.
Do they have a bit more money?
Well, their balance sheet doesn't look super healthy at the moment, but I know that sport is a key priority for TVNZ because often with terrestrial TV, now with streaming platforms, everyone is hopping off to the laptop to watch something on Netflix, but where terrestrial TV still makes gains is in live sport, so something that's appointment viewing that you'll sit down in front of the TV for. And the other one, curiously enough, is apparently reality TV, so everyone will tune in for that week's episode of Love Island, and when there's a big final of Survivor, everyone tunes in. So
maybe there needs to be a reality netball show.
Could you imagine?
Where does this leave the players? How are they feeling about this sort of season of uncertainty and the prospect of taking a dip in wages and then with the pressure of Commonwealth Games next year and a World Cup after that? How are they? What's the mental health like in the netball squad?
I think there's been definite unease amongst the players with this kind of lack of communication and transparency from Netball New Zealand over what is happening. The Players Association have tried to, make sure that the players are looked after. I guess for the most part they've been focused on the ANZ premiership, which is, the coaches and the managers have tried to make sure that they've just kept an eye on that. But of course, that we're also talking about the future of coaches and managers in this as well. So, they're all, look, some of them have been looking overseas and some of them will go. I think we look at Grace Wiki and see what she has learnt going to the Swifts this year. I think other players would very much like to do that. They get paid much better to play over there than they do in a domestic competition here.
A new era for Aussie netball and for women's sport globally.
Let's go. Left it high. 2 from 2.
Netball Australia penning a major deal with the new all-women sports network, founded by Hollywood icon Whoopi Goldberg.
Hey everybody, it's Suncorp Super Netball. I'm so proud to be talking to you right now and thanking you for joining us on AWSN.
They've signed this big deal with Whoopi Goldberg. And her
famous netball fan,
yes, with her women's sports network, and it's going to be shown all around the world. The Suncorp Super Netball League.
Whoopi's global reach is massive. Launching late last year, the new network already reaches 900 million households. That's 2 billion individual viewers across 65 countries.
We feel so grateful that, we're put on a big platform now to be able to be seen worldwide, and I think it's so important for young kids who are playing the game that if you can't see it, you can't be it.
The mood of Australian players there, a stark contrast to their rivals across the ditch.
The uncertainty is causing anxiety among some who are desperate to see the game get back to its glory days.
It's important to understand that we're human beings, not just netballers, and so we want the best for our netball, but also what's the best for us as individuals.
I found really interesting in the lead up or the last couple of weeks of the ANZ Premiership, we heard a lot of players speaking out where previously they haven't. So I think that just goes to show the sense of unease or, uncertainty that was creeping in, that players were actually prepared to put their head above the parapet and say, hey, we're really anxious here and we need some certainty.
And that was the tenor of what they were saying?
Yeah. I think there was one quote I read in the New Zealand Herald that was, the girls are freaking out. And they were because, after the final, we're entering into contracting season, and it's already happening over in Australia. Like there's people moving left, right, and centre. There's like a big transfer market, and their competition hasn't even finished yet. And so, I think there was fear that they would miss their window, they would miss their opportunity. We heard Steph Bond also on Radio New Zealand yesterday. Talking about what this deal might mean.
She's the Players Association.
She is the head of the Players Association. Yes, she's been managing this negotiation period. And she sort of indicated that it's likely players will have to take a pay cut, but there will need to be other things put around that. So potentially if players need to find a second income stream, then training times are going to have to change. So that's going to have to be built into the players' agreement that you can only train but to certain hours a week. So, for those top players, that they're going to be wanting to chase those opportunities overseas where there aren't such restrictions. So it's not just, I guess, the money side of things, it's the off-court preparation side of things, the resource that they're given in Australia that won't probably be available here.
When you think about, there's only probably 18 players in New Zealand who get paid salary that would carry them through the year, Silver Ferns. So you've got this next tier of players who only get paid probably 10 weeks a year. And so they do have to have, other streams of income, or some of them are studying. So we're already seeing that at that level. But, maybe it's that, some of our Silver Ferns may have to start looking for extra work as well.
And while the elite players could be polishing off their CVs to make ends meet, Suzanne says we need to make sure the game as a whole is in good health.
This is the other question. Will there be so that at the moment they have an NNL, which is the second tier of competition, will that survive this? Maybe not. I don't know that it will get free-to-air coverage, that some of those games have been on Sky. So they've really got to look beyond the top tier now and make sure that the next are protected. Look, the community game is growing. Apparently, school netball grew by 11% last year. The sport is getting back up to near where it was before COVID, and what that did to all sport in New Zealand. But I just really hope that that the sport can continue the momentum that we saw from the CES competition.
And the Silver Ferns squad will be named on August the 11th. That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. This episode was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by Will Saunders. Thanks to Suzanne McFadden and Dana Johansson. I'm Alexia Russell. Goodbye for now.